I still can't quite believe what just happened. I know. I inquired with the bailiff after the court session was adjourned, and it seems Mr. Vigil was taken to hospital to recover. Right. 10 years ago now, Mr. Vigil attempted to commit suicide by jumping out of the window. But ever since then, he's completely blocked the memory of those events from his mind. Nobody knew his secret, not his family, not even the man himself, but I forced it out into the open. Was it wrong of me to do that? Did I overstep the mark, I wonder? Rudo! Oh, Iris. You are miles away. Anyway, I've brewed a fresh pot of soothing tea for you. Oh, thank you. You and Susie have had an exhausting day so far, haven't you? Oh. Thank you, Iris. How thoughtful of you. Did you happen to know where Sholmes is? When we came out of the courtroom back to the defendant's antechambers, he disappeared. Oh, no, I don't know. He just suddenly sprang to his feet and left. All he said was, I must leave. I wonder if he's pursuing the mystery of Inspector Gregson's death. Well, you know what Hurley's always saying, don't you? There are mysteries in this world that should perhaps never be solved. For the construction of a solution comes only at the expense of the destruction of something else. What does that mean? He knows very well that when you open someone else's old wounds, you often open your own. But he just can't take his own advice and leave well alone. Solving mysteries is too important to him. That's so true. But that's what I like about Hurley, after all. I suppose that's the lot of a great detective in some ways. So then, let's have tea, and then I'll give you a hand. Oh, do you have time, Iris? Yes, I finished this month's manuscript at last, with barely a day to spare before the deadline. Oh, I'm so looking forward to it. A brand new story. You know, I always hide Hurley's violin in the days before I have a deadline. You do? Poor Sholmes. I'm sure that's very wise, Iris. How sensible of you. Now then, my dear fellows, let's make a plan of action before we continue our investigation. So how did it go in court this morning? Well, we still don't know the truth about what really happened, but one thing's clear. Van Zieks definitely didn't do it. Oh, goody. Yes, that's right. We managed to uncover several new facts as well. Oh, really? And there was another development too. Kazuma. Yes, it's quite clear now that Kazuma-sama is not himself. The way he's acting, it's almost as if he's possessed. And no, I mean, at the end of the proceedings earlier, he was like a bloodhound the way he was chasing down Vigil's forgotten past. He's not normally so mercilessly persistent. What's going on in his head, I wonder? I feel like they should have given Kazuma one more case at the very beginning of this for us to spend time with him, because I'm having trouble relating to this. Because we didn't really see him for that long. I really need to sit down with Kazuma to try and understand what he's going through. If Gregson was really murdered the day before his body was discovered, then Van Zieks has to be innocent. What? The day before? Well, that should be easy enough to work out just by examining the corpse, surely? Yes, you'd expect so, but curiously, no time of death was included. That is curious. There are still unanswered questions about Van Zieks, though, aren't there? Ah, do you mean... I mean, what was he doing there on Frenso Street that day in the first place? Well, according to the man's testimony, he said he was investigating Gregson, didn't he? And it turns out that little room was actually the inspector's secret office. Oh, that sounds like it has all the makings of a wonderfully devilish plot. But then why was the notice board in there covered in all these particular papers? Papers about cases with a link to the Reaper. I'm starting to get a bad feeling about all this. Dude, what if Gregson was having... Oh my god. What if Gregson was having Vigil do that so that he could establish an alibi for himself while he was killing the person that was the victim of the Reaper? That would be a valid reason to send someone out and make a big fuss that you were Gregson. Fuck. We must start by looking into Inspector Gregson's movements of late. I never imagined I might have to be investigating an inspector's movements. Well, according to the entry in his diary, he was carrying out an incognito investigation of the Red-Headed League before his death. Oh, you mean what he was doing the same as Hurley? Well, Sholmes was trying to apply, whereas the inspector was supposed to be investigating. I do wish it had been the other way around. But then wouldn't Holmes be dead? Maybe be dead? Anyway, as it turns out, the inspector who went to investigate the Red-Headed League that day wasn't actually Gregson, it was Vigil. It's strange they didn't mention the fact that another detective turned up, though, because apparently they recognized Holmes on Sholmes on site. But they didn't mention anything about seeing two detectives. You know what that sounds like to me? Establishing an alibi. Yeah. Yes, you're absolutely right, Iris. But why would Gregson need an alibi? Yeah. That's the question, isn't it? It would appear that the inspector had something to do he wished to keep secret. On multiple occasions. I don't believe it. I always thought he was just a harmless lover of fish and chips. But perhaps they were seasoned with something a little more potent than salt and vinegar. I think perhaps we should try to move away from food analogies. Well, anyway. If Lord Van Zeeks felt that he had need to investigate Gregson, yes, I agree. We must try to find out what he knows. Vigil, you say? Isn't that the name of the lady who came to visit Hurley? That's right. Try explaining this one. That's right. To ask Mr. Sholmes if he would help her to find her missing husband. Only Sholmes completely passed the buck to us. Actually, didn't you say that Vigil had been taken to hospital? Do you know which one? Ah, St. Sinner's, of course. There are like 4 locations in London. I'm starting to wonder if all other hospitals in London have closed down. But that's amazing, Bruno. You found the lady's husband. Well, I suppose I have, by accident. And 10 years ago, while Mr. Vigil was the chief warder at the prison, he was responsible for overseeing the professor's incarceration. No. So when the convict escaped, he was held responsible and immediately dismissed. Ugh, sometimes I really don't want to grow up. Yeah. There's more. For 10 years after that, while he was ostensibly working as a peddler, he also had another secret job. He was paid by Gregson to be his stand-in, to impersonate the inspector. Impersonate Gregsy? But why? Yeah. Yeah, I wonder why. Ugh, Ginny was right. I'm starting to think all adults are up to no good now. Including you, Runo. I haven't paid anyone to impersonate me. That means he has ties to the professor and to Inspector Gregson, though. So I do think we ought to pay a visit to Vigil, don't you? Back to St. Sinner's, then. Well, I think it's clear what we need to do, isn't it? Let us investigate, my dear fellows. Oh, Iris! You're even more enthusiastic than usual. If anyone has anything to hide, my special Wilson shooting iron will set them straight. That water pistol? It's stuffed full of extra hot, piping special blend of mine. Then I'm quite sure it will be very effective. I'd better be careful not to hide anything. Well, it feels a little strange that Sholmes is nowhere to be seen, but still, let's go and see what we can find. Yes. Alright. I want to go and see Zeke's first. Lord Von Zeeks is reading. Look. He doesn't seem like he wants visitors, does he? But he must have noticed we're here, surely. Don't make eye contact. Don't make eye contact. Don't make eye contact. Fuck, I made eye contact. What do you Nipponese want? That's no way to greet the lawyer who's trying his hardest to prove your innocence, is it? Perhaps not. Hmm? I apologize. So what can I do for you, Mr. Naruhodo? Lord Van Zeeks, speaking earnestly. Oh, the fog will lift over London for the first time in months tomorrow. This does feel very strange. I must say, I was impressed. Oh, well, thank you. Not by you. By your fellow Nipponese, your prosecutor friend. Oh, I see. Yes. It's sardonic, don't you think? For a man such as me, so loathing of the Nipponese, to be entirely at the mercy of you two. I suppose it's retribution for having played the part of the Reaper all these years. Played the part. You once told me that you'd gladly allowed people to believe you were the Reaper, because it helped reduce the amount of serious crime that took place. If keeping quiet and playing the part benefits the cause, a cause I am myself committed to pursuing, then why would I choose to say anything at all? But the henchman of a criminal killed by the Reaper attacked you only the other day, and that was just the most recent of many attempts, wasn't it? Someone is clearly profiting from your silence about all this. Someone is using you. Believe me, ever since the Reaper appeared, I've been doing my utmost to expose him, or rather, expose the organization. Ah, it's a whole organization. It's inconceivable that all those accidents were orchestrated by one man. No, the Reaper always appears to have very accurate information about the accused in each case, which can only mean that somebody at Scotland Yard is involved. Someone at... You can't mean... It's taken me many years, but I finally identified the central figure in this Reaper organization. Tobias Gregson. Yeah, that's what I thought you might say. Gregson? The Reaper? So, the reason you were investigating Gregson is because you intended to expose him as the Reaper. As I said, the Reaper of the Bailey is no single person. It's a highly secret organization with close ties to Scotland Yard. But there's no doubt that Gregson was a key member of that organization. I don't believe it. Are you saying that Gregsy, that he was behind all those awful criminals meeting there? Gregson didn't do the dirty work himself. Oh. He was the tactician. His job was to covertly investigate the Marks and plot their assassinations. In order to do that without arousing suspicion, he regularly needed a firm alibi. which is where Mr. Vigil came in, posing as the inspector. Vigil knows nothing of the Reaper, but the room he rents on Frenso Street was almost certainly the headquarters of the operation. Gregson would have met the assassin there for briefings. I bet that's not gas mask, plague doctor lady. So we don't actually know who carried out the killings then. Actually, I do have a name. You what? Well, if you can name the man, you have the true identity of the Reaper already then. Or I can name the woman. Oh. She's a young woman by the name of Asa Shin. Wait, what? Shin? Oh. The true name of a terrifying killer, that was her name. Oh, Jesus fucking Christ. I didn't expect that, but that would explain a lot about her. She came to Japan posing as a visiting student and murdered Wilson. Then, just when it seemed that diplomatic protection would help her escape Japan and conviction, the mystery woman herself murdered in a small summer beach hut. And that woman was actually the Reaper of the Bailey? Mr. Naruhodo, this perhaps isn't the place to discuss. No, of course not. We can't mention it here. The fact that she's killed Wilson, because Iris doesn't know, and it's very likely that man was her father. We are going to have to tell her at some point, boys. Asa Shin. I should let father know at once. Yes, I agree. Man. I don't like it. Kazuma, isn't it? Kazuma Asogi. You say he's a friend of yours. My best friend. He's the whole reason I came to Britain. It was on his merits. I have nothing but respect for him. Yes, I understand that only the very best students are selected for such opportunities. And I had a fine demonstration of how sharp he is in the proceedings earlier today. He missed nothing. But he did also go, oh yeah, the fact that the witness is lying doesn't mean anything. There's no contradiction there. In fact, his flawless performance very much reminded me of his father. Genshin Asogi, the professor. It's true that the aristocracy at the time was the root of numerous grave societal problems. They were abusing their power, playing with the common man as pawns in politics, in economics, in war. In many ways, Asogi was carving out a canker from society that we British couldn't deal with ourselves. I see. But that's precisely why it makes no sense. Clint Van Zeeks was a noble and upstanding man. He wasn't corrupt. As far as you know. Why did that damned Nipponese have to go and take my brother's life? In spite of having once saved mine. He saved your life? It was 10 years ago, on a foggy night. What was to be the professor's final strike had sent a wave of panic through the capital. So Clint Van Zeeks had already been killed at this point. Genshin and I were walking down some back streets at a late hour. Of course, at that point I had no idea of the true nature of the man at my side. All of a sudden... Don't make a peep, you're coming with us. We were surrounded. All of our assailants were armed with pistols, their faces obscured by scarves. Clint was not only from noble heritage, he was a brilliant prosecutor as well. This ring really fucking stands out. The scum of London hated the sight of him, and they had no sympathy for his younger brother either. I'd been targeted several times before already. Yeah, it's Von Zeke's alright. We've got him. I could hear them murmuring amongst themselves. I knew they were after me. But just when I thought my time had come. If I let them kill you, Clint would never forgive me. It was a Soggy's voice, just a whisper in my ear. That is a weird thing to do if you just killed the guy's brother. After that, I don't remember exactly what happened. The next thing I knew, there was silence all around. Genshin lay on the cobbled street. Blood was seeping from his left hand. He'd shielded me. Two days later, they arrested him. On suspicion of being London's most notorious mass murderer ever, the Professor. It's a little weird, isn't it? How awful for you. All at once, I lost the brother I revered and the foreign friend I held in such high regard. I'm so sorry, Lord Von Zeeks. That's the end of my miserable tale. I never thought I'd recount it to anyone. Well, thank you for confiding in me. The Professor, the Reaper, and Inspector Gregson. I wonder just how intimately related they all are. I still can't quite believe that Gregson was essentially the Reaper, giving assassination orders to Giselle Brett. Mr. Naruhodo, let's go and inform my father. I'm sure our government will want to hear about this new information. Oh, that means I get to meet your daddy, Susie. Hooray! Yes, alright. Let's head back to the Great Waterloo Hotel, then. Thanks, Von Zeeks. It's been a great talk. I thought it yesterday, and I think it today. This place is so princely. It's a wild guess, but I have a feeling you'll think the same thing tomorrow, too. My tea has a finer fragrance than whatever they're serving in the tea room here, though, wouldn't you say? Ah, look who we have here. This is an unexpected pleasure. You know, I never noticed it until that exact moment. His mustache looks like a comb. Ah, Father. Oh, this is your daddy, Susie. How lovely. What a charming young lady. And you are? This is about to get awkward. Oh, really? So you're the author of The Adventures of Herlock Sholmes? That's me, Iris Wilson, at your service, sir. Susie's been a wonderful friend over me last year, you know. Oh, Miss Wilson. I must say I read your work regularly with much interest. Iris actually lives with Sholmes, you know. Is that so? Well, perhaps that goes some ways to explaining that bright look in your eyes. Heh. You wouldn't be smiling so airily if you know just how bright she is, believe me. Now then, young Naruhodo, it was a pleasure seeing you in action earlier. As an invitee of the symposium, I was allowed to observe from the gallery, after I twisted some arms. And I must say it was truly an exemplary performance. Oh, well, thank you. Say not you. Say not you. Although I'm fairly sure you admitted by Kazuma. Yeah. No, please don't misunderstand. It was you who impressed me. Really? X. You didn't miss a step against Asogi, and we all know how capable he is. Really, to have matured into such a fine defense lawyer in less than a year is quite extraordinary. It's very kind of you to say so. And really nice to hear. What I saw in court today confirmed what I'd been hoping for. The favor I mentioned yesterday, Naruhodo. I trust you haven't forgotten. Oh, no, you did mention something, didn't you? But first, we have something to report. Of course, of course. Shall we take tea while we discuss matters? I wonder where Judge Jigoku has got to. Father, do you know about the so-called Reaper of the Bailey? I've heard rumors. Some members of the judiciary explained it all to me yesterday. Of course, when I was visiting a student here in London, the Reaper was yet to emerge. Right. He didn't appear until after that case with the visiting students. Lord Van Zeeks, who was in the dock today. That was Barak, the younger brother of Clint Van Zeeks, I believe. That's right. And he's known throughout London as the Reaper, as you've heard. But the truth is, it wasn't him behind all those deaths. It was somebody else. I see. So what you're saying is, there's been a professional killer at work here. Exactly. Someone by the name of Asa Shin, in fact. I beg your pardon? Did you say Asa Shin? You mean that Giselle Brett woman who was responsible for killing my great friend? Oh no, a friend of yours. Here it comes. Professor Mikotoba, I think perhaps we shouldn't discuss this right here. Because the friend the professor is talking about is Wilson. And that's not someone we want Iris to find out about. Alright, let's go. We don't want to talk about Mr. Wilson dying. Hey, Mr. Wilson's death. Biscuits! This hotel has the most delicious looking biscuits. That was rather out of the blue. She's doing this deliberately. I think I'll go and see if I can purchase some. I wonder, would you like to come too, Iris? Oh, yes. You just try to leave me behind. So that young girl is called Iris Wilson, is she? Yes, that's right. And she's the author of all those adventure stories starring the great Sholmes. But the name of the accredited author isn't isn't Iris, is it? It's Dr. John H. Wilson. Yes, I know. That's the name of her father. Her father? Dr. John H. Wilson. I was deeply indebted to the man for all the kindness he'd showed me during my time in London. That's why I was keen to reciprocate and invite him to the Imperial Yumei University. But he was murdered by Giselle Brett. Why? Why would the hand of the Reaper stretch all the way to Japan? Iris knows nothing about that case. But it all seems very likely that the victim, Dr. Wilson, was her father. Well, I can't say that we ever spoke about his family, so I don't know if he had a daughter or not. But I think I can say with some certainty that he was never the great detective's partner. So it could have been another Dr. Wilson, you think? Well, John and Wilson are both common names. Still, it's probably best not to mention this to the young lady until we can be sure. That's what we thought, yes. We're back with cinnamon biscuits. Cinnamon is the devil's work. Get out of my face. Oh, they smell no, they don't. Shut the fuck up. I think... No, shut the fuck up. Get this cinnamon out of my face. Yes, I'm sure you're right, Iris. I haven't seen Judge Jigoku for a while, have you? Guilty! Ha 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 ha. But that guilty is still ringing in my ears. No, now you mention it, I haven't seen him since this morning either. I suppose since the symposium's opening was postponed, he'll have gone to explore at the Great Exhibition. What if he's dead? That reminds me of something you mentioned yesterday. About Judge Jigoku having once been in the dock himself. Ah, yes, it was all tied up with that accursed trial. The closed trial. Seishiro was trying to mitigate Genshin's guilt, so he took to the stand to testify. But he got a little carried away and, actually managed to break the witness stand. Damn. Damn. My man's strong. Oh my. He also said some contemptuous words about the British Empire, for which he was charged. Oh dear. Although it's worryingly easy to imagine him doing that. Well, it was alright in the end. He was acquitted and we returned home to Japan together. Thank goodness. Ah yes, talking of Seishiro. I have a copy of the photograph we all took together here, yesterday. Please. What a lovely picture. It certainly seems to shout, "We've arrived in Britain." Why are you putting this in the evidence? What you putting this in the evidence for? What's wrong with the photo? Why are you putting it in the evidence? Something weird? What have you done? Is Goku dead? Did he get murdered? Is Susato's dad gonna get murdered? None of us had any idea what was coming when we took that, did we? No, that's so true. So, you mentioned a favor you'd like to ask me. Well, this fateful trial that you're fighting, one way or another it will be over before long. And when it is, I'd like you to accompany me back to Japan. You want me to do... what? Father? What's the meaning of this? Now, Susato, you should understand. You've seen how our courts work firsthand. Japan's judicial system is in its infancy, especially when it comes to defense. This is bullshit. The Supreme Court of Judicature is in desperate need of a good defense lawyer. As soon as possible, really quite urgently, in fact. This is bullshit. I don't believe it for a second. I've not even been in London a year yet. I've read all of Susato's reports. I'm well aware of your extraordinary talents. Nah, this is bullshit. He thinks we're gonna get killed at the end of this trial for knowing too much. After having seen you in action with my own eyes earlier today, there's no question. You, Naruhodo, are precisely the man our country needs. No, you're full of shit. Nah. You'd be leaving then, Runo. But then, what am I supposed to do? You came here to serve as Asogi's judicial assistant. Our government is still in the process of deciding how best to deal with this situation, though. You've always chosen your own path, Susato, and I trust your judgment in this matter also. Father! Please, the pair of you, don't look so downcast. It's merely a suggestion, you understand, a hope, if I'm honest, but I won't force you. All I ask is you consider it and come to a decision by the time the trial concludes. Yes, alright. You won't leave, will you, Runo? The thought hadn't even crossed my mind. Up until now, it's just been trying to do what I believed to be Kazuma's will. But it turns out he's still alive, so... where does that leave me? Well, if you'll excuse me now. I need to telegram government ministers and the Japanese police with this information. Of course, Father. Thank you. I look forward to next month's installment, Miss Wilson. Oh, good, and please do come to Baker Street sometime, won't you? We'd love to entertain you. Yeah, I would be delighted. The best of luck for tomorrow, Naruhodo. And give my suggestion your full consideration, won't you? Yes, I will. Going back home. You know, Kazuma-sama has always meant a great deal to my father. I'm sure he'd love the chance to meet with him and talk to him about all of this. Yes, no doubt. Asa Shin. Of course, it's so obvious. How could I have neglected to consider the possibility before now? Sholmes. Hurley, where have you been? Why, I joined you all for tea, of course. What an extraordinary question. I didn't notice you at all. No matter, no matter. Anyway, to more pressing concerns. Mr. Naruhodo. Oh, yes? I must dispatch a telegram to your country at once. It is a matter of much urgency. To Japan, you mean? Tell me, to whom can I entrust the task? Quickly now, who? Oh, well... My father has just left to send a telegram to the Imperial Police Bureau himself. I see. Well, he looked reliable enough for a bearded fellow. I don't think what Father sports could be considered a beard. There's not a moment to lose. Ask your trusty unshaven father to see this is sent. I will, but what is it? No questions at this time, if you please. All we can do is pray that for once, my deduction is awry. Doesn't that imply your deductions are normally correct? Now then! You may be surprised to learn I am a very busy man. I certainly have no time to hide behind these settees and eavesdrop on other people's conversations. So that's what joining for tea meant. I leave the sending of this in your hands then, my dear fellows. Ah, wait a minute, Sholmes. He just sort of ran off, didn't he? At quite a pace. And left the unpaid bill for his tea. What does it say? Read that shit. I must catch up with... What does it say? And I'll run and call us a cab. What does it say? And there was me thinking everyone would be clamoring to pay Sholmes' bill. Motherfuckers. Alright, let's go to the hospital, I guess. This is the ward where Mr. Vigil was brought, apparently. To be frank, I'm a little worried about seeing him again. The lawyer. Hello again. Are you feeling better now, Mr. Vigil? Yes, thank you. Somewhat better. I'm sorry to have caused you to... I mean, it was because of me. If I hadn't exposed your secret and forced you to remember things you'd tried to forget... The prosecutor was here until a few moments ago, too. You just missed him. Oh, Cosmo beat us to it. He said much the same as you. He was very apologetic. But the truth is, I brought all this upon myself. Please don't think like that. Keeping it from Avi, my wife, all these years, I've carried such a sense of guilt. But that's not the worst of it. Over time, I obviously came to deceive myself as well. You mean about your dismissal? Looking back now, I'm beginning to think that perhaps Inspector Gregson didn't stumble across me by accident at all. I mean, he compensated me so generously for acting as his stand-in. He was clearly concerned for my well-being and doing what he could to help. So perhaps Gregson knew exactly what had become of Mr. Vigil all along, then. I'm sure this is just desserts for 10 years of lies and deception, but... It wasn't me that helped the professor escape 10 years ago. It wasn't me. I swear it. I swear it's true. Oh, Mr. Vigil. I'm sure you'd rather not dredge up even more from your past, but... If possible, could you tell us exactly what really happened? I need to get all of this off my chest. I just want someone to tell me what I should have done. Inspector Gregson was obviously engaged in a special operation of some sort. He was investigating something that even Scotland Yard couldn't know about. Details of the Reaper's marks. It was when he had to carry out those investigations that I would take his identification and impersonate him. You'd pretend to be the inspector and carry out investigations. Oh no, never. A common street peddler couldn't possibly carry out a proper police investigation. All I would do is go to the specified location and make a little hoo-ha. Just something to leave an impression, so everyone would think a detective called Gregson was here. So, that's what you were doing on the day prior to the incident? Yes, he asked me to make an appearance at the park on Lime Street. So, as usual, I flashed the inspector's identification around and was very vocal about my presence. But then you were taken prisoner. Yes. So, you would always make a point of showing Gregson's ID and being generally loud. That's what the inspector asked me to do, yes. That's one way of becoming a legendary detective, I suppose. Not a good one, though. And as you know, I suffered this bruising around my neck at their hands. But the following day, they kept their word and released me. Without returning the inspector's ID, however. We had arranged to meet in the Frenso Street room at 5 that day so I could report back to the inspector. But at the agreed time, that's when I heard the gunshot. It was at midnight on the 17th of June, 10 years ago. That was the time scheduled for the execution. But the professor's execution never actually took place, did it? Or rather, the execution itself must have been used to effect the plan of escape. I hardly dare to imagine what a chilling plan it was. Barclay was renowned for being the highest security prison in the country. Everything that went in or out of that place was searched multiple times. But there was one notable exception. Or rather, one notable loophole, something that was never questioned. I have a feeling I know what that loophole was. The coffins into which the bodies of the executed were placed, correct? Yes. Once the coroner had confirmed the death of a condemned convict, the body was taken in its coffin for immediate burial in Lowgate Cemetery, just behind the prison. The chief warder first had to sign the necessary papers. And after that, no member of staff was permitted to touch, oh god, the coffin containing the body. When executions took place, only the executioner and the coroner were permitted inside the chamber. I would wait in the adjacent room for word that the condemned convict was dead. On that occasion, once I had that confirmation, I went into the mortuary to find a lone coffin, as usual. The procedure was that I would sign the paperwork, having checked the coffin, then nail it shut. But for some reason that day, the coffin was already nailed shut. No. I didn't think anything of it at the time. I assumed that my deputy must have checked the coffin and nailed it shut before I arrived. So you mean the coffin contained? Yes, I could only imagine that Soggy, having escaped his execution somehow, was alive inside the coffin. The coffin was then taken out through the main gates and deposited in Lowgate Cemetery. Presumably there wouldn't have been enough air inside to breathe for long. So in the early hours following the burial, somebody dug up the coffin to set Genshin free. But in the end, he was fatally shot in the graveyard. What on earth really happened in Lowgate that night? I'm afraid I really don't know. All I can say with certainty are two things. Soggy couldn't possibly have escaped that way without help from somebody working in the prison. And that somebody was not me. Obviously you knew the man then. The professor, I mean. Genshin Soggy. Yes, I remember him well, in fact. Would you mind telling us what you know? Well, having been condemned to death as he was, any contact I had with the man was short, obviously. After that trial, which was carried out behind closed doors, attended only by the elite members of the judiciary, they called for his execution to be carried out at the earliest possible opportunity. The outcome of the trial was set from the beginning, wasn't it? It was a time of delicate diplomacy, when Britain and Japan were in the process of signing an important treaty. That meant that this potentially destabilizing case had to be dealt with swiftly and discreetly. The man had less than a week in total. As I was chief warder, I oversaw his short stay in the cells until his final hour. I remember being struck deeply by his noble character and incredible resilience. What do you mean exactly? He was a killer of many men, but he was always quiet and polite. He was a gentleman and a man of intellect. In fact, I couldn't bring myself to believe what he'd done, so I asked him one day. Those 5 members of the aristocracy whose lives were taken, were you really responsible? I'm guilty of the unforgivable crime of ending another man's life, yes. A very non-committal answer. The following day, the closed trial took place, and the verdict was no surprise. Guilty. That night, when he was brought back to his cell, I saw something. Something unusual. Something unusual? What? The last will and testament of Genshin Asogi. As I said, it was on the night following his trial after he'd been found guilty. I was doing the rounds of the cells, and when I looked into Asogi's, I noticed that he seemed to have a sheet of paper in his hand. Ah, his will and testament, then. As soon as he noticed me, he hurriedly shoved it behind his back. But why do you find that unusual? Isn't it normal for a man to pen his will when he knows his death is nigh? Yes, that's true, but there were special conditions to Asogi's incarceration. What sort of conditions? Well, even though he was held in a cell designed for condemned inmates, he was allowed to keep his personal effects with him, with one exception. Really? He was allowed his things? Of course, he'd been convicted of killing 5 members of the aristocracy. But at the same time, he was a guest in our country from the Empire of Japan. The powers that be were determined that his final days shouldn't be needlessly uncomfortable. And what was the exception you mentioned to the personal effects? That's the point. He wasn't permitted to have writing materials. Specifically, no pens or paper. So, he was prevented from leaving any written record of what happened to him. Yes, that's the long and short of it. I have no idea where he obtained the paper. Any writing materials would have been confiscated from him upon his incarceration. As I said, he hid the paper behind his back and then pleaded with me. What did you just hide behind your back? Please. Please turn a blind eye. This is my lifeline. But you know it's against the rules. You're the only person who's seen. It's if you just agree to keep quiet. Alright then. But what's on that paper? A last will and testament. This will is the only weapon I have left now. How can a will be a weapon? So I decided to pretend I'd seen nothing, and I let him keep his will. But then later, it just seemed to vanish without a trace. What? What do you mean it vanished? It would seem this isn't the end of the story of this mysterious will. I was the only person who saw Sogi's will, but somehow it disappeared. It was after Sogi's execution, which was actually an elaborate jailbreak. The warders gathered up Sogi's possessions and that were in his cell. They were all to be sent back to his family in Japan. To poor Kazuma-sama. And you're saying that it wasn't anywhere to be found with his personal effects. The will, I mean. That's right. Though I didn't search through them myself. But Governor Caden was livid. He was screaming, "It can't have disappeared completely." That doesn't quite make sense, though, does it? In what well, several, actually, but... Well, we understood that only Mr. Vigil was aware of the will, in which case, how did the prison governor know to look for it? You're right. I really don't know how he knew, but it certainly seemed as though he knew of the will's existence from the outset. Only he didn't refer to it as a will. He said it was the Soggy Papers. The Soggy Papers. I really can't tell you anything of the subsequent events. Because, well, of what happened. Your dismissal and the way you blocked it out. I'd forgotten all this until today. I don't suppose it's relevant to the case, though. Well, anyway, thank you very much for sharing it with us, Mr. Vigil. We're very grateful. Genshin didn't murder anyone, did he? I'm afraid there's really little more I can tell you. My wife, Evie, will be here shortly, so I do hope I don't appear rude, but... No, not at all. Thank you again. But what will become of you now? Well, impersonating a police officer is a criminal offense, of course. I imagine that once I'm fully recovered, I shall be arrested. I'm so sorry. Don't be, please. This was all my own doing. I always knew that this day would come. Well, I wish you well. Goodbye, Mr. Vigil. Before you go, there's just one thing. Oh, yes? What is it? The Soggy Papers. I'd be very grateful if you'd make no mention of the thing I told you about them. Presumably for some good reason. It's my understanding that their very existence is a closely guarded secret. If it became known, I'd remembered. Well, it could be rather troublesome, I think. I understand. Some sort of will that Genshin Asogi penned just before his death, which the man himself claimed was his last weapon. I wonder. Perhaps it had something to do with his plan to escape. If there's anyone who might know more about a document that Cosmo's father left behind, it would be Mr. Vigil's governor. Then we know precisely where we must go. Alright, bro, thanks. Hold on, let me hydrate before this one. I'm going to have to do a Scottish accent. And I've been talking for several hours now. Just in time for Discord to beep. This might be quite jarring, but I'm not a cat anymore either. Yeah. Here we go. Oh, back again, are you? Yes. Hello. I've heard all about your investigations. I read the report just now. You found him, eh? Vigil. Yes, luckily. Well, anywho. The laddie doesn't work here no more. So your work is what? So your case is naught to do with Barkley. I wouldn't like you to get the wrong idea about that. Of course, yes. Except for the fact that, well, you're just fucking wrong, but, you know. Of course, yes, Mr. Vigil stopped working here 10 years ago now, so... Yes, we've seen his dismissal notice, haven't we? He was given the chop. Aye, Kimmer, you can very well. So how about a wee handcuff biscuit? Oh, those really are like little handcuffs. And hard as irons, too. Well, that's less than ideal. So, what's sport you doing here doing here today? Well, there's something else we'd like to ask you about, actually. Is that so? Why are you looking at me like that? We believe there might have been a document that disappeared from Genshin Asogi's cell. I think it's been called the Soggy Papers or something. He didn't like that very much. Did I no say Gregson's death is nowt to do with that might have nowt to do with things that might have happened at Barclay. Leave the past in the past, laddie. Let's not footer with about with irrelevant details. Fucking Scottish. His expressions changed completely. We're clearly onto something here. We were told, like, not to mention the Soggy Papers to anyone, but that didn't last very long, did it? That murderer's botched execution and the whole miserable escape. They were Barclay's darkest hour, aye. A shocking embarrassment. Because the convicts had a collaborator on the prison staff, you mean? Aye. For shame. The coroner who confirmed the death of the man after his execution, Courtney Scythe, and me chief warder at the time, Vigil, who was in charge of the whole affair. But Mr. Vigil says he didn't know anything about it. The rascal wouldn't he say otherwise, eh? More handcuffs? Oh, how could I say no? You can never have too much iron in your diet. You can, but, you know. When Mr. Vigil... Oops. When Mr. Vigil was handed his dismissal notice as a result of what happened... I didn't read, like, any of that, actually. What did he like to say, but that's just Vigil trying to get out of it. Do you don't think he wouldn't have jumped from the shock of his crimes being exposed, eh? I do. You wouldn't say otherwise, though, would you? Of course, I can't shun all possible responsibility myself. I shouldn't have let him deceive me. Actually, there's barely anybody that kens about what went on at the time now. We Gregson haven't been murdered, and Dr. Scythe forbidden from having any visitors. No yeah, obviously fucking not. Well, we're not going home empty-handed. And I wouldn't dream of sending you packing with nowt kimmer. Here, take a handcuff or two. Oh, well, it would be rude to say no. Wouldn't want to become anemic. I suppose, if there's anybody who might still ken about what happened back then, it'd be that lass from the forensic division, Maria Gorey. Maria Gorey? Aye, Scythe's daughter. She didn't have no more, just the one. But the wee Byron? Followed in her mam's footsteps. You didn't ever see her without a scalpel in her hands. Ah. Fuck, you're stupid sometimes, dude. Mama. Yes, we remember. She was quite distinctive. Dr. Scythe's daughter, Maria Gorey. We could do with talking to her. So, she's Dr. Scythe's daughter, but her surname is... Surname? Surname is Gorey. Aye, there's some family history, I'm sure, but I didn't ken with the ins and outs of it. She grew up watching her mam working with the bodies of the folk who died in strange circumstances, and decided to do the same with her own life. That can't be healthy. I can't understand it myself. Perhaps she was driven by a deep respect for her mother. Well, or she just got weirdly into bodies, you know. Perhaps. Anywho, she was in charge of Gregson's autopsy, I believe. Right, and the coroner responsible for the incomplete report. Someone told me once that the wee lassie always loved her mam's stories about cutting up bodies. That's completely normal. There's even a rumor that she used to listen to the funeral march as a lullaby. Okay. Well, then perhaps her mother might have told her about the autopsy from the case 10 years ago. I'd say there's a fighting chance at least. After all, that was a life-changing case for us all. We really need to speak to Miss Gorey. Well, thank you very much. I'm no happy about any part of this. It took years for Londoners to finally forget the old professor business. Can you no give up on this, laddie? Stop asking pointless questions. I'm sorry I don't like dredging up these painful memories for everyone. Can you just stay away, no? Leave me alone and dinny come back, eh? So about the Soggy Papers, though. How'd you come to ken about that, laddie? There's no many folk even here in prison who've heard of those papers. Ah, well, I can't tell. We shouldn't really have brought it up to him at all, but here we are. Because, I mean, what do you think he's really gonna say? Oh, yeah, I've got him. You can have a look. Whatever. You know, it's not happening. I'm afraid our source must remain confidential, sir. We've been led to believe the papers are actually a last will and testament. Is that right? The professor's, or rather, Genshin Asogi's. Aye, that's right. You're well informed, Jimmy. Oh, is that the end of the silent treatment? But then after the convict's execution, it mysteriously vanished from his cell, didn't it? Evers, no, you're off cock there. I think you didn't quite get your facts straight. It was there in the cell, exactly where it should have been. Okay. That doesn't seem true. Oh, not what we heard elsewhere. Let me just have a wee look around in here. I'm sure I can find it. So this will be a forgery, I assume? Ah, here you are. Here you are. See? The Last Will and Testament of Genshin Asogi, written with a calligraphy brush. Of course, I can't hear a word of those Japanese squiggles. But I mind it says he leaves all his worldly possessions to his son back in his homeland. Yes, that's correct. That's the gist of it. So these are the Soggy Papers. Aye, of course they are. Papers written by Soggy, nae doubt about it. There's no mystery here, laddie. That's your lot. After the skirmish of that Slanister of an execution, we sent the man's possessions back to his clan in Japan, and that was the end of it. I think we ought to make a record of this. Yes, I would also like to look at the record. What exactly does it say? I, Genshin Asogi, hereby request that upon my death, any and all material possessions and wealth belonging to me in London be delivered to my son, Kazuma Asogi, in the Empire of Japan. It is with deep sadness that I accept my fate in this foreign land, in knowledge that I will never see my homeland or family again, but I regret nothing about my chosen path. Well, if this is real, then I guess the weapon is whatever got sent to Kazuma. Which, probably the sword, I take it. You know, which is a little literal for it, but... One thing before you go on your way, Naruto. Oh, yes? Those papers are not to do with Gregson's death. I'd prefer if you didn't make no mention of them outside this office. Or rather... I wouldn't just prefer it. Consider it an order from the highest levels of our government. I understand. Bad news, it's already in the court record. Alright, let's get out of here. Well, I want to go and see Gory. Where would we do that? Neither of these, none of these, maybe Chief the Strongheart's office. Up to no good again, I see. No arguments, Prosecutor Asogi. You will continue with the trial exactly as I instructed. Is that clear? Perfectly. It's Kazuma-sama. Defying Lord Strongheart by the sound of it, he never did know when to back down. On your way now, Asogi. My lord. Kazuma. Okay, bye. Asshole. He left without saying a word. Yes, what are you doing here? Oh, well, I was just hoping to ask you a few questions if you wouldn't mind. I wanted Van Zeek's trial concluded today. But Prosecutor Asogi's unwelcome inquiries are going to make it take longer than necessary. Unwelcome inquiries? As a result, I'm losing even more precious time. Currently 2 hours, 55 minutes, and 41 seconds. 42, 43... Then we must resolve everything before 3 hours have passed, Mr. Naruhodo. In a miraculous not even 5 minutes? Anyway, can't let the man's obvious bad move put me off. I need information. Does Prosecutor Asogi believe that Lord Van Zeeks is the Reaper? I wouldn't know. It was 10 years ago, in that fateful close trial, that Lord Van Zeeks made a name for himself among the judiciary. But the next trial he fought, he lost. It meant the ringleader of a criminal organization was acquitted, thanks to all the jurors being under duress. But that's awful. Yeah. Yeah, it is, isn't it? The man's freedom was short-lived. He lasted just 3 days. Yes, let me see. He died in a rock slide at his place of work, I believe. Correct. That was the inauguration of the Reaper of the Bailey. And people believe Van Zeeks was responsible? He was brought to trial himself, but it was shown to have been an accident. So he must have had a solid alibi then. Nevertheless, the mysterious deaths continued. In total, 16 persons perished in unusual circumstances, ostensibly at the hand of the Reaper. That's a long run of coincidences. Well, okay. Well, the Reaper's true identity may well be revealed by this trial. And the impact that revelation would have on the British public cannot be understated. Is that why it's a closed trial? Precisely. This country hasn't seen a closed trial for 10 years. So the last one was the professor's? Correct. Actually, we heard that originally you were going to prosecute that trial yourself, Lord Strongheart. Van Zeeks entreated me to relinquish the prosecution to him, that he might avenge his brother's death. And here we are, 10 years later. With the son of the man Van Zeeks had condemned now looking to avenge his father's death in the same way. They do say that what goes around comes around. However, it would seem that the new young prosecutor is harboring some ulterior motive as well. Yes, blatantly. Yes, blatantly. I like my organization to run smoothly in the exact manner that I prescribe. As with the giant clock in here, I won't tolerate a single cog being out of step with the others. Ah, so that's what all these gears are about. Sure. If the young man refuses to mesh with other parts of my great machine, then I will be forced to take steps. What do you mean? Not something with which you need to concern yourself. In any case, all your questions will be answered tomorrow. Now, I shall have to ask you to excuse me. As of this moment, I've been delayed from attending my next meeting by precisely 3 hours. Oh my, that is a long time. And I hold you entirely responsible, even though we miraculously managed to fit everything in not even 5 minutes. I wonder if you might agree to us talking with Prosecutor Asogi. Discussions between the defense and prosecution outside of the courtroom are generally frowned upon. However, I will make an exception in this case. Now go. You can find him in his office. Oh, thank you. Sick. Let's go see him at once. Cosmo's my best friend in the world, but I'm really not sure what I'm really not at all sure I know how to talk to him at the moment. Alright, let's go. All the way at the bottom. What a cute little diorama you've made. So, this is the officer of Prosecutor Asogi now, is it? Oh, he kept the bats! Oh, sick. Kazuma-sama is doing so well for himself. Yeah. Sure. Even though he's always been forced to kneel on the floor, Japanese style, in that dark corner. It's his habit to sit Seiza style whenever he's working. Kazuma. I thought it wouldn't be long before you paid me a visit, Ryunosuke. I was right about what I said, wasn't I? Sorry. That you have all the makings of a great defense lawyer. Well, I always believed that you'd fulfill the dream of advocating in the British courts. I just never imagined for 1 second it would be as the prosecutor. Seeing you stand in a foreign courtroom so gallantly, realizing your dreams, you even got to have 2 swords instead of 1. I'm truly happy for you. And I am truly thankful to you, Judicial Assistant Mikotoba. How formal. Damn. She's not getting laid anytime soon. Ryunosuke. I always thought it would be fun for you and I to shake up the British legal system a little together. This isn't quite how I envisaged it, but I suppose it's just another twist of fate. I've learned a lot of things during my time in London. About how Sosato-san's father was himself a visiting student here once, along with Judge Jigoku. And about what happened with your father. Then you'll have no difficulty understanding why I had no choice, why I had to find a way to get to Britain as a visiting student myself. I want to hear it from you, Kazuma. As you wish, Ryunosuke Naruhodo. Alright, what happened? Give us the deets. It's getting on for a year now, since what happened on the SS Burya. We were heading across the oceans from Japan to Great Britain, when a bizarre series of coincidences led to those tragic events. I thought I'd lost my best friend forever. You might yet, you don't know. I must have been unconscious for a long time. When I awoke, I was laying on a bed. It was a narrow little room. There was a posy of flowers by the pillow. It took me a little while to realize that I was in the cabin of a ship. I had slipped out of the room and headed up onto the deck. Were you already suffering from amnesia at that point? Yes. I didn't know what had happened or where I was. There was just this voice in my head. You have to do you have something you have to do. Something no one else can know about. Go to Great Britain. Your task awaits you there. I like the idea of this, that Kazuma had, like, a voicemail message left in his head for himself. It was a calling I couldn't ignore. It compelled me relentlessly. Out on deck, I saw that I was on a huge steamship and we were docked in a large port. It must have been Hong Kong. Yes, it must have been. You don't know? You had to leave there, it sounds like. Presumably just before they were due to carry your body off the ship. I had no idea of the situation, but I did have the feeling that this was in some way my last chance. So I concealed myself among the disembarking passengers and went to shore, and you still don't know if it was Hong Kong? Then I disappeared into the crowded streets of that foreign port city, so I could plan onward my journey to Great Britain. Just under a year ago, with all my past memories lost to me, I was left behind in Hong Kong. Okay, you did know then. Everything was foreign to me. The sights, the sounds, the smells. My head reeled. I was truly at a loss. I realized now that I had escaped as a dead man, with nothing but the clothes on my back. No money, of course. Oh, how terrifying for you. Luckily, though, I had 2 feathers in my cap. One being your knowledge of English, I suppose. That's right. And on the back of that, I was able to pick up some work as a deckhand on a cargo ship. Eventually, after calling at countless ports, I finally arrived at Dover. That must have been some 3 months ago now. Your formidable tendency of purpose showing itself again. I would definitely not be that driven. I mean, the man had lost his memory and had literally nothing to his name. Yeah, I think I'd be dead. But he still managed to make his way to London on the opposite side of the world. Of course, I had no idea why I'd moved heaven and earth to get here at that point. So how did you end up becoming Van Zeeks' apprentice, then? That can only be called an extraordinary stroke of luck, really. I was sort of under the impression that this might have all been some long con setup on Strongheart's part, but it doesn't really sound like it anymore. You see, I was stopped at the border because I had no papers. They took me straight to Scotland Yard. And by sheer coincidence, Lord Strongheart was there to attend a meeting. And that's when the second feather in my cap came into play. Would that have been your knowledge of the law? Yes, exactly. How convenient that you have, like SpongeBob, you'll forget everything except English and law. Lord Strongheart was curious about an Easterner with intimate knowledge of British law. Well, he must have clicked immediately who you were. He took me back with him to the Supreme Court and assigned me to the prosecutor's office. And then 9 days ago, you finally got your memory back after the trial involving Drebber. Why does that mask do that to your eyes, by the way? Yes, I did. Ever since I first met you at Yume, you talked about your dream. Mark my words, Ryunosuke, I'll be chosen as a visiting student and make my way to Great Britain. Did you know the entire time about what happened to your father here? Probably not exactly, but he has to have known something. 16 years ago. Damn, you look like such a little fucking nerd. Where the fuck is your neck, dude? When my father left on that exciting trip to Great Britain, I was just a boy. We took a photograph together the day before his departure. It was my last memory of him. But what I remember most about my father is his unswerving sense of justice. He doesn't really look like the kind of guy to end up being the villain, does he? 6 years after he left, a gentleman called at our family home. He told me that Genshin, my father, had been taken ill in England and passed away. It was Professor Mikotoba, your father, Sasato-san. Oh my. Ever since then, the professor was very good to me. He even helped to fund my university education at UMei. I'll forever be in his debt. But nevertheless, I just couldn't bring myself to believe what he told me. Oh. Then, one day, a letter arrived at our house from Britain. There was no indication of the sender, so I opened it assuming it was from an old acquaintance of my father. What I read in that letter changed my entire life. What did it say? It said that my father had been a mass murderer, and the writer cursed the Asogi name. Oh no. So I guess he did know more or less exactly then. As a result of that letter, I found out what had been hidden from me all those years. Presumably the letter was sent from a relative of one of the victims. If whoever it was had been a member of the judiciary, he could have been present at the closed trial. The letter revealed that my father had been sentenced to death, executed for being a killer. I'm so sorry that you had to find out that way. I imagine the British government did its very best to silence whoever sent that letter. But someone who knew the truth and couldn't bear the resentment was always going to be a problem. But still, it could have been written by anyone. Why would you believe such a thing? Well, because it's really fucking specific. Like, that would be a weird fucking thing to just send to someone unprovocated, wouldn't it? There was a newspaper cutting included with the letter. It was the first I'd ever heard of the professor and his terrible killing spree. Well, what did my father have to say about the letter? Probably nothing. I couldn't bring myself to show it to him. There's no way he would have said anything anyway. What? Why not? Because he deliberately concealed the truth from me by telling me my father was taken by a fatal illness. That couldn't have been easy for him, and he'd done it out of consideration for my feelings. So instead, I showed the letter to Judge Jigoku. Is that so? Ah, to the other visiting student. He faltered for the briefest of moments, but then he just laughed the letter off. But in that moment, I saw it on his face. He was undeniably shocked, shaken momentarily, before recovering his poise. A year later, my bereaved mother succumbed to the strain of grief, and she too passed away. Damn, dude. That was when I made up my mind that one day, without fail, I would cross the seas to Britain and seek the truth for myself. The truth about my father, Genshin Asogi. And I wouldn't let anyone stand in my way. Oh, Kazuma. What we learned today in court turned things completely on their head. It was an impressive piece of lawyering, Ryunosuke Naruhodo. From yourself, you mean? Van Zieks isn't the Reaper, you know. I almost don't want to believe it myself, but it turns out that Inspector Gregson himself the victim was. It's clear that the Inspector was behind the Reaper's activity all along. Glad we're on the same page. I mean, he had to. He's easily smarter than you are. Even if he said some ridiculous things. The real question is, who's been giving orders to the Inspector? Gee, I wonder who. Yes, Barak von Zykes is the real Reaper. Never mind, you're stupid. And I know that 10 years ago, it was him who decided my father must be a mass murderer and sent him to his grave. That's objectively true, but not the other part. No, he was merely seeing that justice was done as the law dictates. He's not to blame. I wouldn't really take that as much comfort if I was him. Ultimately, it's people who condemn people. The law is just a tool they use to do it. And when a man condemns another man, he must take responsibility for his actions. Of course he must. But I know for certain that my father would never have taken another man's life. It has been starting to seem more and more like that is the case. Kazuma. On the contrary, my father's life was taken by the Reaper. That is likely true. Let's examine this here diorama. What the? It's a scale model of the crime scene. Oh yes, I realize that. Does the prosecution office make a model of the scene for every case? Apparently so. They do? That's fucking sick, dude. Yeah, I'd want to keep every single one of them. Sometimes it helps to visualize things better and notice things you hadn't spotted before. Actually, the miniature notice board is my work. Be honest, you enjoyed making that. Dude, I fucking wish I had the kind of money to do this kind of shit. I love, like, all this kind of little craft stuff. Is there anything else we're meant to be talking about in here? Yo, Bats, what's up? Yeah. Wow. You disturbed the Bats, did you? Fitting companions of Von Zeke's, wouldn't you say? I do have to admire the, commitment to the bit to just keep bats in your office. I've seen things flying in Strongheart's office too. Doves, I think. Yes, because he's significantly more pretentious. Perhaps you have to like birds to attain rank in the judiciary here. Although bats aren't birds, of course. How about a sparrow? What's that supposed to mean? Oh, no. Is that an insult? What's wrong with sparrows? Do you know who the man in the portrait is? Yes, we all know who is in the portrait, Ryunosuke. Why would I? You really don't? But you're Lord Van Zeke's apprentice. Yes, apparently, not friend. Apprentice, not friend. And during the time I was suffering from amnesia, I didn't even notice that picture. I find that unfathomably hard to believe. Oh, really? It's not the smallest picture. I wouldn't have the first idea what the man decorates his office with. Well, bats, for one. Is there anything we're actually looking for in here? Yo, let's rifle through his drawers, dude. That's Van Zeke's incredibly stylish desk. Oh yeah, why is this fucking candlestick so harshly outlined? It's not my style, though. No, I notice you've been working at the little table on the floor, kneeling down Caesar style. I thought it was some kind of punishment set up by Van Zykes when I first saw it. Van Zykes. I find it the most comfortable way to work. To be honest, I sit fairly similarly most of the time. I can't do it after a couple of minutes of sitting on my legs folded under me. They start to go tingly. Don't exaggerate, Ryunosuke. We both know you can't even manage a minute. Damn, dude, you didn't have to do him like that. Oh my god, these are all chalices. I didn't even realize he has a lot. Lord Van Zeke's fine collection of hallowed chalices and bottles all neatly lined up. Yes, he's extremely particular about all that. He has a strict regimen for everything, from the storage of the casks to the bottling of their contents. Gosh, you must be having a really tough time of it being his apprentice. Apprentice? Actually, no. Oh. He's so particular about it all, he refuses to let anybody else touch any of it. This doesn't surprise me, yeah. So it's been easy for me, in fact. Talk about weird. Alright, enough fucking around. Let's show him the will. Kazuma, what do you make of this? There's only one place where a defense lawyer... Really, dude? You got nothing to say about this? You've really got nothing... Alright. Whatever you say. That was it, right? Yeah, okay. Well, where are we going now? The prison? Did we go to the prison? We went to the prison, right? Well, I'm back again now. Hello. Do you have anything to say about these? What's that? It's just something... Okay. How's nobody got anything to say about this? Alright, whatever. Anything going on in Frenso Street? Yeah, examine. Over there. No? Alright. I don't know where I'm going. Once again.